It is 10:20 a.m., the Bad Route Rest Area. The name itself sounds like a warning. Located 22 miles west of Glendive, Montana, this is a place where civilization thins out and silence takes over. But this morning, the silence is broken by the roar of an inferno. A 1,980 Plymouth Horizon is screaming in flames. The fire is so intense, it melts the dashboard. It blisters the paint. Sheriff Jim George arrives on the scene. The heat hits him first, then the smell. It isn't just burning rubber. It is the distinct, sharp sting of gasoline, an accelerant. This wasn't an engine failure. This was an execution of property. But as the smoke clears, the sheriff notices the first glitch in reality. The car is empty. There is no body in the driver's seat, no body in the passenger seat. The keys are missing. The ground outside is frozen hard. No footprints leading away. No signs of a struggle in the dirt. Just nothing. The car belongs to Dexter Stefonek, a 67-year-old widower from Wisconsin. Dexter is a man of routine, a man of safety. And here is the detail that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. The forensic anomaly. Dexter is a small man. He stands barely 5'5". To drive this car, he has to pull the seat all the way forward, his chest almost touching the steering wheel. But when the investigators look inside the burnt wreckage, the driver's seat is pushed all the way back, as far as it can go. This car wasn't driven here by Dexter. It was driven by someone with long legs, someone over 6 feet tall, someone who was sitting in that seat while Dexter was already gone. How does a healthy man, a loving father, simply evaporate from a burning car in the middle of a Montana plain? Why are there no footprints? And who is the giant sitting in his driver's seat? What happened at Bad Route wasn't just a disappearance. It was the opening move of a 40-year chess game between a cold-blooded predator and the ghost of the man he tried to erase. Welcome to the nightmare on Interstate 94. To understand the horror of the ending, we have to look at the beauty of the beginning. November 1985. Ronald Reagan is in the White House. The world feels safer, simpler. Dexter Stefonek is not a risk-taker. He is not a drifter. He is a 67-year-old father who just wants to go home. Dexter has just spent a wonderful visit with his son in Corbett, Oregon. The visit is full of laughter. It's full of plans. Dexter isn't a man running away from his life. He is a man rushing back to it. He lives in Wisconsin. He has a routine. He has neighbors who wave to him. When he says goodbye to his son on the morning of November 18th, there is no ominous music playing. Just a hug, a wave, and a promise. "I'll take it easy," he tells his son. "If I get tired, I'll just pull over at a rest stop and sleep in the car." It is a practical decision. Dexter is frugal. Why pay for a motel when he has a perfectly good car? In 1985, this is normal. It is the false safety of the era. We didn't know then what we know now about the monsters that patrol the highways. Let's start the clock. November 18th. Dexter drives east. The miles roll by. Idaho, the mountains. He is making good time. The sun sets. The moon rises. He keeps driving. He is pushing himself. He wants to be home. By the morning of November 19th, he crosses into Montana. He has been on the road for nearly 24 hours. Fatigue is a strange drug. It makes you vulnerable. It narrows your vision. Around 8 a.m., Dexter approaches Bad Route Rest Area. It's not a destination. It's just a pause. A place to close his eyes for an hour. He pulls the Plymouth Horizon into the parking lot. The gravel crunches under his tires. The engine cuts off. Silence returns to the plains. He leans his seat back, but not all the way. Remember, he's short. He just needs a nap. He feels safe. He doesn't know that he has just parked in a hunting ground. He doesn't know that in less than 2 hours, his car will be an inferno, and he will be the subject of a file on a detective's desk that won't be closed for 4 decades. Because Dexter isn't alone at Bad Route. Another vehicle is there. Or, perhaps, it arrives just moments later. A Chevy pickup truck, white, with a green stripe. And inside is a man who has been waiting for someone exactly like Dexter. The timeline of a murder is usually a straight line, point A to point B. But at Bad Root, the timeline is broken. It fractures. Enter Fred Siegel. He's the caretaker for the rest area. A man who knows the rhythm of this lonely place better than anyone. At 8:30 a.m., Siegel arrives to clean the bathrooms. He sees something. A white Chevy pickup. It has a distinct green stripe running down the side and a camper shell, a topper on the back. It sits there like a sentinel, silent, watchful. Siegel doesn't think much of it. Travelers stop, travelers sleep. It is the law of the road. But at 9:30 a.m., when Siegel finishes his work and prepares to leave, the reality shifts. Siegel looks in his mirror. He sees the Plymouth Horizon Dexter's car. He claims he sees it just pulling in. But in the same breath, he sees a man walking away from it, carrying a gas can. Pause for a second. Let your brain try to process that. If Dexter just pulled in, how is there already a man walking away from his car with gasoline? Unless Dexter didn't drive the car in. Unless the car was already commandeered. This is the bizarre anomaly that keeps detectives awake at night. Siegel describes the man with the gas can. He isn't Dexter. He is taller, he wears a ball cap, he moves with purpose. He isn't filling the tank to help a stranded motorist. He is carrying the fuel for a cremation. Siegel drives away, thinking it's just a mundane maintenance issue. He leaves Dexter Stefonek alone with the man in the ball cap. 30 minutes later, the smoke begins to rise. The environment here isn't just a backdrop, it is an accomplice. The atmospheric villain. Bad Root Rest Area is a dead zone. No cameras, no phones, just the wind drowning out the screams. If Dexter fought back, the only witness was the prairie grass. And when the fire starts, it destroys more than just the car. It destroys the timeline. Winter hits Montana like a hammer. For 4 months, the case freezes, literally and metaphorically. Sheriff Jim George has a burnt car. He has a missing man, but he has no body. Without a body, is it a murder or is it a disappearance? The snow buries the plains, hiding whatever secrets were left behind. The Stefonek family waits by the phone in Wisconsin, but the phone never rings. March 8th, 1986. The Thaw comes, 17 miles away from the burning car. In a remote, trash-strewn area near the railroad tracks, a couple is scavenging for aluminum cans. They aren't looking for horror, but they find it. Underneath an old, rotting mattress, they find Dexter. He hasn't just been killed, he has been erased. But here is where the logic of the case snaps in half. The red herring that confuses everyone. Robbery seems like the obvious motive, right? A lonely traveler, an easy target. But lying right next to the body is Dexter's suitcase. And inside the suitcase is his money. His cash is still there. Why kill a man, burn his car to cinders, drive his body 17 miles into the Badlands, but leave his cash? This screams of something else, something darker than greed. The autopsy reveals the brutality. Dexter was beaten, savage blows to the head. And then, the execution. 2 shots to the back of the head, a double tap. This is professional. This is cold. This is overkill. And then, the final piece of the puzzle, or perhaps the ultimate distraction. Back at the rest area, inside the men's bathroom, investigators find a message scrawled on the wall. Graffiti. Hot Jock, Wisconsin, 11/85, shot wad. It reads like a tombstone. Wisconsin, Dexter's home, 11/85. The date of his death, Hot Jock. Slang? A taunt? A sexual reference? Is the killer bragging? Is he playing a game with the police? Or is he leading them down a rabbit hole, forcing them to look at a sexual motive that never existed? The police are frustrated. The investigation frustration sets in. They have a body. They have a burnt car. They have a cryptic message on a bathroom wall. But they have no fingerprints, no DNA, no face. Just a ghost in a white Chevy pickup who lit a match and watched the world burn. The case of Dexter Stefonek doesn't just go cold. It freezes solid. For nearly 40 years, the file sits in a box. Sheriffs retire. New sheriffs are elected. The world moves on. The Berlin Wall falls. The internet is born. We carry supercomputers in our pockets. But in Dawson County, Montana, the ghost of the white Chevy pickup still haunts the highway. Here is the investigation frustration that makes you want to scream. Science advances. DNA technology becomes the god of modern forensics. Investigators go back to the vault. They want to test Dexter's clothes. Touch DNA could be on his collar, on his shirt. If the killer grabbed him, he left his genetic fingerprint. But when they open the archives, the clothes are gone. Lost, misplaced, destroyed in a cleanup. The incompetence of the past assassinates the justice of the future. The micro-hook here is devastating. We had the technology to catch him, but we lost the map to find him. But monsters like this, they don't just disappear, they migrate. While Dexter's file gathers dust, the man in the white truck is still out there. He is living his life. Maybe he's a neighbor, maybe he's a grandfather. He thinks he got away with it. He thinks the fire at Bad Root burned away his sins. But he forgot one thing. The past is never dead. It's not even past. And in 2024, the timeline is about to catch up with him. January 19th, 2024, the bombshell drops. The Dawson County Sheriff's Office finally puts a name to the ghost. Charles Gary Sullivan. He isn't a mastermind. He isn't a phantom. He is a career criminal, a drifter, a predator. And when you look at his file, the pieces of the puzzle don't just fit, they slam together. Remember the glitch with the car? The white Chevy pickup with the green stripe? Records from 1985 show Sullivan owned that exact truck, not a similar truck. That truck. Remember the location? Sullivan was a miner, a transient worker. He traveled Interstate 94 constantly. Bad Root wasn't a random stop for him. It was part of his territory. And remember the tall man in the driver's seat? Sullivan stands over 6 feet tall. He fits the anthropometric profile perfectly. But the darkest proof isn't in Montana, it's in Nevada. In 1979, Sullivan murdered a young woman named Julia Woodward. He left her body in a desolate canyon, just like Dexter. He buried her under debris, just like Dexter. He was a sexual predator who hunted the lonely highways of the West. Technology finally linked him to Julia's murder in 2019, and that thread unraveled the whole sweater. So, justice is served, right? Not quite. Here is the twist that leaves a bitter taste in your mouth. Sullivan is 79 years old. He is already serving time in Nevada. He is dying. The prosecutors look at the case. The lost clothes, the lack of direct DNA in the Montana case. They decide not to prosecute. They close the file. They name him as the killer. But there will be no trial, no gavel. Dexter Stefonek gets the truth, but he doesn't get his day in court. But knowing who did it is only half the story. The question that still haunts us is why? Why did a meeting at a rest stop turn into an execution? What happened in those missing minutes before the fire? To understand that, we have to enter the mind of the killer. We have to look at the theory triangle. We know who drove the white truck, but we need to understand the collision of these two lives. Let's climb the triangle of theories, moving from the logical to the absolute nightmare. Level 1. The robbery gone wrong. This is the scientific explanation. Sullivan is a predator. He sees a lone car. He sees an old man sleeping. He approaches with a gun, demanding the keys and the wallet. Dexter, startled and groggy, maybe tries to resist, or maybe he just moves too slow. Sullivan panics or flies into a rage and kills him. It makes sense. It fits the profile of a highway bandit. But here is the detective rebuttal. If it was a robbery, why is the money still in the suitcase? Why burn the car, drawing massive attention, but leave the cash? Criminals don't kill for sport. They kill for profit. Unless profit wasn't the currency he was after. Level 2. The sexual motive. This theory dives into the subculture of the 1,980 seconds rest stops. Hot Jock, shot wad, the location. Did Sullivan approach Dexter for sex? Did he mistake Dexter for someone else? Or was Sullivan a gay basher, a predator who specifically targeted men at rest stops to punish them for their perceived sins? It explains the rage. It explains the overkill nature of the beating. But the rebuttal is swift. There is zero evidence in Dexter's 67 years of life to suggest he was gay or seeking a partner. He was a father, a grandfather, a man rushing home to his routine. The graffiti wasn't a confession of a relationship. It was a brand. It was Sullivan projecting his own twisted fantasies onto his victim. It was a final insult. And that brings us to level 3, the darkest theory. This wasn't about money, and it wasn't about sex in the normal sense. It was about the hunt. Sullivan didn't kill Dexter because he had to. He killed him because he could. He saw a vulnerable life, and he decided to snuff it out. The burning of the car? That wasn't just to hide evidence. That was a spectacle. The graffiti? That was him marking his territory, like a dog. He wanted the police to find it. He wanted to play a game. But if you think that's the end of the horror, you're wrong. There is one final Conan element hidden in the files. One detail that turns this from a murder case into a psychological horror story. The suitcase. Dexter went missing in November. His body was found in March. 4 months later, the body was decomposed. The elements had done their work. But the suitcase found next to him? The forensic report notes something chilling. The suitcase was in good condition. It hadn't been sitting in the snow and mud for 4 months. If it had, the leather would be ruined, the contents destroyed by moisture. But it wasn't. This implies the impossible. The suitcase wasn't left there on the night of the murder. It was placed there days before the body was found. Do you understand what that means? Sullivan didn't just kill Dexter and leave. He kept the suitcase. He took it with him, a trophy, a souvenir. Maybe he drove around with it in his truck for 4 months. Maybe he kept it in his room. And then, months later, he came back. He returned to the scene of the crime. He walked back to the rotting body of his victim, and he placed the suitcase next to him, like returning a library book. Why? To relive the moment? To see his handiwork one last time? Or did he know the police were getting cold, and he wanted to give them a clue to heat things up again? This is the last lingering clue that proves Sullivan wasn't just a drifter. He was a monster who couldn't let go of his kill. We talk about forensics, we talk about timelines, we talk about monsters, but we forget the silence that follows. For 40 years, the Stefonek family lived in that silence. Dexter's son in Oregon said goodbye to his father on a crisp November morning, expecting a call the next day. That call never came. Instead, they got 4 months of agonizing hope, followed by a lifetime of agonizing questions. Think about the emotional echo. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every birthday, there was always an empty chair. They grew older. They had children of their own. The world changed. But Dexter remained frozen in 1985. A man stopped in time on a lonely highway. They knew what happened, but for decades, they didn't know who. They had to walk through grocery stores, wondering if the man standing next to them in the checkout line was the one who lit the match. And this brings us to you. The call to detective. Charles Gary Sullivan has been named. The file is officially closed. But is it solved? There are still gaps in the timeline. Those missing hours, the returned suitcase. Do you believe the robbery theory Or do you think the hot Jock graffiti reveals a darker, more personal motive? Was Sullivan hunting that day? Or was it a chance encounter that exploded into violence? Go down to the comments. Tell me your theory. Because sometimes the collective mind sees things that detectives miss. Let's keep Dexter's story alive, even if the law has put it to rest. In the end, the case of Dexter Stefonek teaches us a brutal lesson about the American West. We build highways to connect us, to bring us home, but those same ribbons of asphalt also connect the predators to their prey. Charles Gary Sullivan will likely die in a prison cell in Nevada, miles away from the frozen ground of Montana. He will take his final secrets to the grave. He will never stand trial for Dexter. There will be no judge, no jury, no verdict. But there is a different kind of justice, the justice of memory. We know his name, we know his face, and we know what he did. The fire at Bad Root was meant to erase Dexter Stefonek, to turn him into ash and mystery. But it failed. 40 years later, we are still talking about him. We are still searching for him. Some people disappear and leave a void. Others disappear and leave a shadow that stretches across decades. So the next time you are driving alone at night and you see the lights of a rest area flickering in the distance, don't just look at the safety, look at the shadows. Because on the highway, you are never truly alone. And the road never forgets.